Welcome to Fireside Chat Fridays. We are just about to start a new live session, and we have a very special guest, as always, who will be joining us today. And we are almost ready to begin. Welcome to everyone who is joining in. As always, feel free to post comments and questions in the chat, and we will start in just a moment. Welcome, welcome. Audrey, welcome.
Thank you so much, Haneen. So lovely to see you.
So wonderful to see you as well. I'm going to do a very quick introduction, and if you're ready, we'll jump right in after that.
Yes, sure.
Is that okay? Thank you so much. So for folks who are joining in for the first time, my name is Haneen. I'm representing Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. I will be your host for today's live with our guest, Audrey Kitagawa. Audrey is the president and founder of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation, president of the Light of Awareness International Spiritual Family, and the former advisor to the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict at the United Nations. She has numerous publications to her name and some prolific awards over the course of a wonderful career, and remains the chair of the Anti-Racism Initiative and co-chair of the Gender Equality Working Group, and a member of the Advisory Council of the G20 Interfaith Forum. To let folks know about Voices a little bit, Voices is an interfaith and intercultural group advocating for nuclear abolition from an intergenerational, ethical, and faith-based perspective. Our leaders span from youth leaders to seasoned diplomats and politicians. We invite you to join us for these moments during Fireside Chat Fridays as we talk about this issue and our role with different leaders and thinkers who are shaping and changing the nuclear abolition landscape, one of whom is present with us today. So once again, please ask questions and leave comments as we go behind the scenes on Audrey's story and what she thinks is most important right now. This video will be available to view after the broadcast, and thank you for tuning in today. So we now turn to Audrey, our guest. Audrey, thank you for joining us. I'm just going to dive right in with our first question for you today, which is, what is your deepest wish for our world, for a world free of nuclear weapons?
Well, thank you so much, Haneen, for this invitation to speak on Voices. And I really want to also extend my appreciation for all of the members of Voices who have a commitment to move for a nuclear weapons-free world. And of course, we have a very dedicated group, and it makes me very happy that there are so many young people joining this group as well, because you carry on the legacy of the importance of bringing the world to a more peaceful place. And we cannot get there if we are constantly under threat of having these weapons of mass destruction that can be deployed with the push of one button. And so the abolition of nuclear weapons must really be a priority for all of us. And since the deployment of the first atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki over 76 years ago, we went from one country having nuclear weapons to now 9 countries possessing nuclear weapons. And other countries are also trying to arm themselves with nuclear weapons and join this club of death. So there are currently in existence approximately 1,300 to 13,400 nuclear warheads, depending on which statistics you read, that are, around in the world, of which 3,750 are active. And while improvement has been made in the reduction from a high in 1986 of about 70,300 active weapons, if we all the currently existing nuclear weapons were detonated, it would devastate our environment and kill millions of life forms, including, of course, people. So the nuclear winter that would follow would release long-term particulates that would block the sun, cause inhalation of toxic substances, and circulate radiation poisoning, which will have long-term effects on surviving populations and species. And, Haneen, it is really time that we take responsibility for our conduct. And I really want to also thank the many people who have been tireless workers for years to make this world a nuclear weapons-free world. And, these are really the unsung and often nameless heroes of our time. And many of our most successful global movements for change has come from civil society. So civil society has been instrumental in helping to create milestones towards our efforts to keep us moving towards peace, despite the many, many countervailing forces to the contrary. And on January 26, 2021 of this year, we really have to celebrate that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons entered into force. So civil society organizations, and of course ICANN, which subsequently won the Nobel Peace Prize, started campaigning for a process at the level of the United Nations to create a legally binding instrument to ban nuclear weapons. So on July 7, 2017, 122 member states of the UN adopted the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And this was an overwhelming majority of member states, of which there are 193 member states. So 50 countries were required as signatories that also needed to ratify the treaty to ensure that it would go into force 90 days afterwards. So on October 24th, 2020, 50 countries were obtained. Then on January 22nd of this year, it marked the 90 days on which the treaty could then go into force. So this is really quite a huge celebration and success for all those workers for the abolition of nuclear weapons. And over the years, of course, many voices spoke out about the immorality of nuclear weapons to visit this kind of death and destruction on wide numbers of people. And, they also explored the ethical dimensions of nuclear weapons. So on January 22nd of this year, when nuclear weapons became illegal, just as chemical and biological weapons became illegal, the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and its binding effect prohibits not only the production, but also the possession, use, testing, manufacturing, acquiring, possessing, or stockpiling of nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices. So it is worthy for us to note that none of the 9 nuclear weapon states have signed this treaty. And their attempts to block this treaty were thankfully unsuccessful. And since they refused to sign on this treaty, technically, this treaty does not apply to them. But the treaty making nuclear weapons illegal subjects these 9 states to greater international as well as international political pressure and criticism. So according to Greenpeace, that issued an article on January 22nd of this year on the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, it indicated that the treaty will also have a significant impact on financial institutions like pension funds and banks, because the treaty also bans the financing of nuclear weapon systems. So by investing in nuclear arms, these institutions have played a major role in the threat of a nuclear Armageddon, but they will now have to choose to either endorse or reject this new standard. And if they decide to reject it, they run the risk of tarnishing their image and becoming unpopular with their clients. And financial bodies of countries such as Germany, Japan, the Netherlands, and Sweden, for example, which do not support this treaty, have already made the decision to disinvest, which demonstrate the extent of the treaty's impact. So what we must do is to continue the mobilization of the remaining member states to sign and ratify this treaty. Simultaneously, there must be monitoring mechanisms in place to ensure that there is greater influence and pressure put on state commitments to prohibit nuclear weapons. Again, civil society, and I really applaud civil society, has an important role to play to generate support of the treaty and apply pressure on their governments to sign and ratify the treaty. And, civil society has made such great inroads in awakening to its responsibility as citizens of the world to step up to the plate in activism where states have failed to do so or not address the concerns of the citizens of their countries. So we really have a collective interest in creating and sustaining our well-being and our human security in ways that will allow us to flourish rather than cower in fear of certain heinous death and destruction of our environment. My wish, therefore, is for civil society to step up more and more in the exercise of their voices and their activism to continue to create these global mobilizations that can address these global challenges that threaten our security and start those processes that compel our leaders to put these mechanisms in place that will ultimately abolish nuclear weapons.
That's just incredible, Audrey. Thank you so much for this rich and insightful and in-depth almost analysis of what's been going on, recent developments, recent events, and really putting us squarely in the middle of what needs to kind of happen next, which leads to one of my later questions as well. But I just wanted to really spotlight, what you mentioned earlier that really resonated with me about needing to take responsibility for our actions. And what I'm really hearing you say is that sense of responsibility needs to manifest on almost a global scale. We're not talking about civil society just in one region, even though that's important, or just in one country, even though, of course, that's also important. But we're talking about this almost global coming together of this chorus of voices, demanding change and exercising their activism, as you so rightly said. And then leading into actions that demand greater responsibility and manifest greater responsibility as future steps are taken. So thank you for orienting us towards this note of responsibility right from the beginning of our chat. So I'm curious, for myself and also for folks who are listening and who will be listening to the recording later on, how did you get involved in anti-nuclear activism, advocacy, and leadership? What's your story there, and what's your vision? You've given us a little taste, and I'd love to hear a little more.
Well, my activism actually came through my long-standing friendship with Jonathan Granoff, who is the president of Global Security Institute. And of course, he was a previous guest on your Fireside chat. And I first met Jonathan at a conference in La Jolla, California in about 1998, and we've been friends ever since. And over the years, I learned more about the nuclear issue through my encounters with Jonathan, and we crisscrossed our paths, which increased when I also established a residence in New York City besides maintaining my residence in Hawaii. And I became an advisor to the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict at the United Nations. And I had many opportunities to hear Jonathan speak on this issue and really saw his one-pointed commitment to it. And in a Toronto convening in 2018, Jonathan pulled together a small group involving former Canadian Prime Minister Kim Campbell, General Romeo Dallaire, Bishop William Swain, who's a founder of Voices, and Senator Douglas Roach to speak about the nuclear issue. And Jonathan also made arrangements for a press conference and a dialogue with Kim Campbell. At the time, I was chair of an interfaith organization, and I later became the chair, and Jonathan wanted the organization to take a higher profile on the nuclear issue. And the visibility which had been previously given by it on this issue was whenever it was addressed during their periodic international convenings. And eventually, the organization did issue a nuclear statement, which Jonathan helped to primarily draft, and this is in 2018. Then for the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and my involvement in Voices, it was determined that a webinar should be done to commemorate the anniversary, but there were many persons who wanted to become involved, and bringing Mikhail Gorbachev and former President of State, Secretary of State, George Shultz into the event would be kind of difficult because of a live webinar, the time differences, connection issues, etc. So I offered to do a film, and everyone in Voices, including Bishop Swing, Jonathan Granoff, Julie Schelling, and many, many others, really worked hard to bring all of the 25 presenters on board who participated in the film. And we finally did the film and launched it on the 75th anniversary of the bombing of the two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And in producing the film, the significance of the Reykjavik summit, which was held over 36 years ago between President Mikhail Gorbachev and then President Ronald Reagan, and it was also attended, of course, by Reagan's Secretary of State, George Shultz, became very, very clear. And basically, these two leaders came so close to seeing the promised land of a nuclear weapons-free world by having the nuclear arsenal dismantled. And the meeting explored the possibility of limiting each country's strategic nuclear weapons to create momentum in ongoing arms controls negotiations. And this meeting resulted in a sweeping nuclear arms control agreement in which the nuclear weapons of both countries would be dismantled. And although ultimately no agreement was reached, many historians and government officials, including President Gorbachev himself, later considered this meeting a turning point in the Cold War. So it was a hugely important meeting. And what prevented the agreement ultimately from being consummated fully was the space-based missile defense system known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, under consideration by the United States at that time. And President Reagan refused to limit the Strategic Defense Initiative research and technology to the laboratory. So President Gorbachev, however, could not accept anything less than a ban on missile testing in space. And despite the failure to reach an agreement on that issue, both sides, though initially disappointed, ultimately felt that the meeting was a success, and it opened the way for further progress for reduction in each country's respective nuclear arsenal, which is now down to 13,100 nuclear warheads, which was, when you think about it, originally 70,300 during the Cold War buildup, as I had previously stated. So it was also the first time in history that the Soviet Union had ever let another country become involved in the human rights issues in the USSR. So the fact that these two giants of history participated in the making of this film to address their roles in nuclear weapons abolition 36 years after their historic Iceland summit, where they saw the promised land but could not quite reach it, really signified their continued commitment to the abolition of nuclear weapons. And I could really see that their commitment was unwavering. And the fact that they so enthusiastically participated in this film, and they were very generous about sharing historic footage, film footage. And George Shultz, may he rest in peace, was 100 years old when he participated in that film, and he passed away this year. And working on that film really heightened the fact that Hiroshima is remembered as that historic moment when this heinous nuclear weapon was first used. But Nagasaki is remembered for the historic moment as the last time a nuclear weapon was used, and may it continue to be in that state of no country ever using it again. So, both, when you think about it, both bombs were dropped on innocent civilians, and thousands of people lost their lives, and over 500,000 in the years that followed. And many of the survivors of the bombings, called hibakusha, have dedicated their lives to tell the stories of their suffering and pain at having lost their loved ones, and themselves having to endure their own pain and suffering from the effects of the radiation on their health, and the utter misery which these bombs rained down upon their lives. So to listen to their stories of the hibaksha and just the four that we had in the film, one cannot be helped but be moved by their pain and suffering. And it really calls us to remember that all of life is sacred and must be respected and honored.
Thank you. This is thank you for this insight into history a little bit. Learning how we got to where we are today, and some of the steps that our leaders have taken in the past that we need to advocate for and continue to call for, in the present and in the future. And I loved also what you highlighted, Audrey, about how leaders inspire one another, right? How our activism and how our actions and our leadership on this issue can inspire others to take their own leadership and help lead us forward into into a new way of approaching this issue, and into new successes and new wins. And hearing your story and other stories like yours is, I think, a reminder of how important it is for us to take up this baton and do the work that is necessary, which really does lead me to my next question, which is, what is your hope for what others might do at this moment? And and I know there are many tasks in front of us, and all of them are very, very important, with regards to nuclear abolition. But really, in your opinion, what is the biggest priority? What is the most important task that we must focus our energies towards at this time?
Well, if you look at the global stage, there are so many huge challenges. Covered higher discipline and infrastructure and social institutions of society. However, my hope is that people will participate in and join global movements and become activists for the deeper understanding of our common humanity and the need for us to work together, to join hands and cooperate to make this world truly secure. And our security and well-being cannot be obtained by creating and implementing more mechanisms for the death and destruction of ourselves and our environment. So ultimately, this goes back to what I opened our session with this morning, and that is that each individual will work on themselves first and take responsibility for their lives, because we are all leaders on some level, and ultimately we are leaders of our own lives. And so in that leadership role, whether it's of our own lives, whether in your family, whether in your community, whether in any responsible position in the government or elsewhere, we are individuals, and as such, we cannot escape our responsibility to hold ourselves accountable and to really study how we can become more deeply spiritual, to find our values and to adhere to our values that speak of the common morality that has been shared over the eons, through our wonderful spiritual teachers, through sacred texts, etc., that always try to help us to remember our connection to that sacred source of all there is, and to help us to be able to live our lives. For where we are is the holy ground, and we become expressions of that light, that love, that peace, the harmony that had been so well articulated, as is our task to unfold as we continue the everyday aspects of living. For it is really in this seemingly ordinariness of daily life that the miracle of life itself is continuously being expressed. And so we have a duty to ourselves as leader of our lives to be able to really be that generative source of inspiration to others. But that comes from being able to have loving thoughts, loving speech, and loving action and be able to practice and implement that every day. And one of the greatest ways that we can really move out of our sense of self-absorption and self-preoccupation is by being servants, to really serve others. And it is this aspect of selfless service that helps us to become better people, bigger people. And it starts to develop that heart of love and compassion, caring for each other. And this is primary because you can be an activist, and activism is important. However, it's the kind of activism or activist that you become. And always we must move through life with great humility because, every life is sacred. And it is like watching a beautiful flower. It's such incredible power in the beauty of its fragrance, in its colors, and the amazing miracle of life in a single flower. And when you see the fields of flowers and the beauty that they represent to us, we can really understand that there is so much incredible beauty in life. But you have to develop your inner life to be able to see with those eyes of appreciation and gratitude for the magnificence of each life, even in a single flower that is waving in the wind of the divine, that is being brought to us in the fullness of its life, to us every day, if we would just see. So, yes, it is taking that responsibility that we can have in this moment on our holy ground to become that expression of love in action.
I'm just these amazing images of the flowers that you described, Audrey, and just the potentiality, right, of this moment, the potential for change, the possibility of what could happen, if we were to step into this field, to use your metaphor. And just thank you for painting that picture and for reminding us what's important, and and on that note, really, what is your advice to youth or to young people who are getting involved in this movement? How might they perhaps bring this inner orientation to this particular work, this very grounded work that you and I have been talking about this morning, and then on a broader scale, how might we and others getting involved, how might they join forces with, for example, with climate action or with other important social justice issues to advance our common interests, to recognize those common interests, and two, to advance them for a safer and more peaceful world. How might we come together?
Well, thank you. We all are standing on this infinite field of potential and possibilities. And in a metaphoric way, we're all the flowers, each individual flower in a beautiful field of flowers. And the important task before us is to re-examine our values and how we are living and how we are spending our time and our lives, because time represents the unit of our lives. So I wanted to share about this really wonderful program that the United Nations has that is called Act Now. And it does come with an app. And, it shows how the UN is keeping up with the younger generation with apps and, the internet. And it helps to provide guidance on how the individual can join the campaign that is seeking to seize the moment and change our course, because right now, it has really put us on a very, existential trajectory. And so we must move towards a more sustainable lifestyle. So Act Now is the United Nations campaign for individual action on climate change and sustainability. And it's important for all of the listeners to hear about this wonderful campaign so that every one of us can limit global warming and take care of our planet, because that is very, very important. So the two greatest threats, the immediacy of it, of course, is the climate change and, of course, nuclear weapons. So by changing our habits and making choices that have less harmful effects on the environment, we have the power to confront the climate challenge and to build a more sustainable world. And, they recommend 10 lifestyle changes, which we each can adopt right now. And anyone, for example, in their daily lives can cut down on food waste. It's amazing how much food we waste every day. And we can learn to take 5-minute showers instead of just luxuriating and running all that water for, long time. And we can bring our own bags instead of using plastic bags. We can drive less. We can turn off lights. We can shop for local produce, go local, and, eat more plant-based diet. We can get into recycling, which we have for many, many years. And so that's a positive change that is showing benefits. And we can refill and reuse bottles. We can unplug from circuits when we're not using our multiple devices. And we can shift to zero waste fashion. So even the fashion industry is getting into, preserving the environment. And, people are getting so creative on how they can help stop environmental degradation. And it is just this kind of creativity that will also help us to deepen the possibility of being able to live in a nuclear weapons-free world. And I really trust that the sacred life that we have been given comes inherently within it, that creativity from that divine source that was given to us and is already part of us, that allows us to tap way, way down deep into ourselves and reach into that creativity that all of the necessities, present to us. So there's a saying that goes, necessity is the mother of invention. And surely there are so many necessary actions that need to be addressed. And I really believe in that sacred gift of life also being able to have us call within ourselves the creative solutions that we must find. So, I would like to say it would be good to educate ourselves about the nuclear weapons and the environmental threat that they pose, and the environmental mismanagement that has been going on for years also needs to be corrected, and really a re-examination of our infrastructures that have been created, that are spawning off so many symptoms of dysfunction that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals seek to address. So, there are many points of engagement with a multitude of organizations that have gotten involved, that have been created on the environmental issue, as we are beginning to see the effects of global warming and our mismanagement of the environment. So we must first, as individuals, however, as I shared earlier, work on ourselves, develop proper values, codes of conduct, and developing the heart of love, compassion, and caring for others. And like I said earlier, service to a higher cause and to others is a great way to get out of self-preoccupation. And when one sees how many are in need, we should be prepared to step forward and fill the void. More and more, as challenges face us, we must be prepared as citizens of the world to engage ourselves, roll up our sleeves and to really help and push us beyond our comfort zone. So we must remember also that the foundation of human rights is based on an inherent recognition that life itself is sacred. It has intrinsic value and it deserves protection. So for any society to be just and stable, the rule of law must be properly promulgated and administered. And of course, the rule of law is especially important to me because, I am a lawyer by profession. And so adhering to the rule of law is very important. So, but it also speaks to the empowerment of the individual to have not only his basic needs met, such as food, clothing, and housing, but also to have the preservation and protection of his dignity and the free development of his personality, as was indicated in Article 22 of this very important document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or, to have that free development of that potential, because we are living and existing in the field of infinite possibilities and the beauty of our own potential.
That's really beautiful, Audrey. Thank you. I feel so inspired that, just right after this chat, I feel like I want to, roll my sleeves up and, get going and, doing what I can. It's just so empowering to hear your words, and so it inspires hope in a way, that these are small actions that we can all take, that we can all participate in, and that have the potential to bring us together, in our commitment to this kind of change, and to taking ownership of our world, as you said, of the infrastructures, of our future, of ourselves, of our values, and of this beautiful shared experience that we all participate in on this planet, no matter where we are. So really, again, thank you for reminding us about what we can do, and that we have the resources to do what we can, to take those actions. It's all there inside of us, as you so beautifully said. So thank you for educating us, for inspiring us, and for giving us a tangible way forward that that we can all participate in. I'm curious, as we conclude today's chat, if there is any prayer or quote or a wish or even a teaching, any little bit of wisdom that you would like to, leave us with as we conclude, anything that we can tie together, all these wonderful words that have been said today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I want to share what Nobel recipient Albert Schweitzer said when he said, "Until mankind can extend the circle of his compassion to include all living things, he will never himself know peace." But I also wanted to share this beautiful prayer written by our friend Jonathan Granoff. I've read this prayer on other programs as well, but it is always well worth repeating over and over again, because Jonathan writes from his heart, and he has a sincere love for humanity. Jonathan is a highly spiritual man with a very well-developed sense of values and ethics. And so may my recitation of this prayer written by him add to the healing of our hearts, minds, and spirits of all those who hear this prayer. And may Nagasaki be the last use of a nuclear weapon, that nuclear weapons never be used again. Oh God, bless and guide us. To eliminate these devices, the apex of creative evil, and all devices of massive, indiscriminate death, please guide us. Each of us came into this world responding to our mother's love. Each came seeking family and love. Each of us became identified with nation, race, gender, religion, and forgot we are one human family, and every person is as precious as we are. But still, in the stillness in our hearts remains a light of the soul, seeking, resonating, and longing for that love that brought us here into this world. That love awakens and informs our universal humanity and awakens our hearts without borders. Intelligence has given us insights into the wondrous secrets of matter, energy, space, and time. Fear, ignorance, arrogance, pride, hatred, and differences have led us to use these insights to create devices of incomprehensible power to inflict indescribable horrific suffering. Please, dear Lord of all, creator of every life, every heartbeat, every moment, every leaf, blade of grass, every one of us, and universes and galaxies beyond counting. O glorious source of love and life, forgive us for forgetting you and your blessings. O friend within all friendship, love within all loves, life within all lives, witness of all and everything. Bless us with the wisdom these devices of death, and use the intelligence, the gift of intelligence, to serve, to heal, sustain, harmonize, understand, and glorify you, our humanity, and honor your creation. To end the suffering of poverty, to protect nature, to love one another, remove the ignorance from our hearts. Grant us hearts of gratitude, courage, and love, such that we will not falter in bringing peace, justice, beauty, and unity to your human family. Help us eliminate these devices of death and the motives from which we create them. Please guide us in beautiful ways of peace, such that we can be witnesses of your goodness. Guide us with compassion, kindness, and love, that we might become fully human. All praises are yours. Amen, amen, and amen.
Thank you, Audrey. This is the perfect prayer for closing our just inspiring exchange. Thank you for making time to talk with us today. We will have the video available for folks to tune into if they missed the live broadcast. And it's just been a pleasure and a joy. And amen to your beautiful words, and see you soon.
Thank you so much, Haneen.
Thank you.
And to every one of our listeners out there, aloha from New York City and Hawaii. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.